So the other day when I went to bed at 5 in the morning, I kinda realized the day it was, and I thought to myself, maybe I should have prepared a special video for Halloween. And since I sadly never back down from anything, here's my special unplugged Halloween video. Unscripted, barely any research, 5 hours of sleep, and maybe a little hangover. Let's do this. Halloween apparently dates back to the Celtic era. So for starters, in the Celtic perception of the world, the days started at sundown. And in their perception of the world, there were two phases. There was the dark phase, and then there was the light phase. And in the Celtic perception of the world, darkness always preceded light. And what applied to their perception of the days also applied for their perception of the years. Which means that the Celtic calendar would restart after the harvest, just before the winter. So for us it would be the middle of fall. The end of the previous year and the beginning of the new one was separated by a special moment that was called Samhain. Samhain was a special period of time that was located outside of their normal calendar. It was basically a separation or a doorway between the 2 years. And according to the Celts, ghosts, undeads, fairies, sprites, elves, and all of those things, they would usually hang out or inhabit separations. So for them, things like windows, doorways, anything that was a clear separation was populated by those weird creatures. So during Samhain, since they were in between 2 different years, the entire world would become a separation. That means that during Samhain, the dead, the fairies, anything that's from the other world, the supernatural world, apparently even gods, would find their way into the mortal world. There are many parts of the Celtic culture and Celtic religion that just disappeared because they were never really written down. We don't have any first-hand accounts of their beliefs and their culture and the way that they themselves saw the world. We only have second-hand information. So we end up with a lot of second-hand information, lots of theories, and people who are trying to piece together their beliefs based on what little information we have. But the good news is that we do have factual evidence and things that we know to be 100% true. Like what I said earlier about Samhain being located outside of the normal calendar and not really existing in normal time, being like a special separation between the 2 years. That is true. We know for a fact that they did believe that. We also know that the Celts did believe that during Samhain, the fairies, the deads, apparently even the gods, would be able to cross over into our mortal world and mingle with mortals. And these facts help us understand and differentiate what is or could be true from what is pure fabrication. I'll give you guys an example. There's this woman called Nadine Cretin, and she wrote a book talking about the different traditions that are found all throughout France. And one of those traditions was that in Brittany, during All Saints' Day, people would leave an extra plate on the table filled with food in case the spirit of an ancestor came to visit them during the night. So the spirit would have some food to eat. He would be well welcomed into the house, well taken care of, and they would also leave some extra logs in the fire to make sure the spirit could keep warm. In our modern society, the concept of hospitality I'm pretty sure it has pretty much vanished, because now when someone travels, he can easily spend the night in a motel or an hotel. He'll be comfortable, he'll be safe, and he will be well taken care of. But back in the day, hotels and motels were not a thing. People had to spend the night in random people's houses who were willing to take them in for the night. And hospitality was governed by strict laws. If anyone dared violate the laws of hospitality, they would be severely punished and the gods themselves would get involved. Basically, hospitality was a sacred thing that was not to be taken lightly. You had to take care of your guests. But yeah, back to Nadine's story. For those who might not know, All Saints' Day starts on October 31st at sundown, and it ends November 2nd at midnight, which coincides almost perfectly with Samhain. There's also old Irish legends and folktales that says the opposite of what Nadine was talking about earlier. In these Irish legends, the mortals, the heroes, would find a way to cross into the realm of the gods or the realm of the undead, either one, and they would be invited by the people of the other world to come and spend Samhain with them. And apparently the laws of hospitality don't only apply to mortals, because in the Irish legends, the mortals are well received, they party, they have fun, they drink, they eat, they dance, and they have a lot of fun. The only problem is that apparently, time doesn't flow the same way it does in the realm of the mortals as it does in the realm of the dead or the realm of the gods. So according to the legends, when the mortals, the heroes, leave the world of the dead or the world of the gods, Turns out the time they spent in the other world far exceeded their own lifespan, their own mortality. So, when they come back to the mortal world, they die and they are forced to go back to the world of the dead. So if the Irish and the Bretons both have stories of the dead and the living mingling together, visiting each other's realm, and celebrating the same day together, that means it's probably not a modern story that they just came up with for some reason. That means they probably had the same cultural heritage where they took these beliefs from. Another custom that Halloween would have taken from Samhain would be the tradition of people dressing up like monsters and the undead. I've heard stories that apparently back in medieval France, the Catholic Church would go around telling villagers and farmers not to dress up like monsters because it was against the religion and against the church. The reason why they would dress up like monsters was that they apparently believed that the monsters who were crossing into their world during Samhain would be fooled by their disguise, and that if they thought the villagers and the people were actually monsters, then the real monsters wouldn't try to attack them. Another Halloween tradition that can be traced back to Samhain was the tradition of pumpkin carving. Now, having said that, I can already hear you guys screaming. I know pumpkins are not native from Europe. They're originally from northern Mexico and southern United States. But even before the Scottish and the Irish settlers arrived in North America, they already had their own traditions of carving vegetables. Instead of carving pumpkins, they would carve turnips. They're apparently harder to carve, but personally, I think they look way scarier. So after finding the Halloween turnips, I kept digging a bit and I found something else that's pretty interesting. I found that in a region of France called Lorraine, there's this festival. It's called Rommelbodzenat. The name is in German, so I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce it, but it's apparently a German translation of an old archaic French term, and apparently it means something like grimacing beets. So traditionally, what the children would do is they would take beets, they would carve them with a knife, they would give them a little scary face, they would put a candle in it, and then they would leave the beets next to doors, windows, and cemeteries to try and scare people. I can honestly say the beets are my favorite. They look really spooky, especially with their cone shape. They remind me of witch hats. I'll show you guys some pictures so you can get an idea of it. But it's basically the same thing that North Americans do with pumpkins. They carve them to make a face, and then they put a candle in it. So just like the stories I mentioned earlier about the dead and the living coming together to party, we have the same tradition in Scotland, Ireland, and continental France. The only difference is the vegetable they use. So for two people who are so geographically apart to have the same culture, they need to have the same cultural heritage. They need to have the same origin where they would have taken that tradition. And both groups have Celtic roots. I also forgot to mention that Rommelbodzenat is celebrated on October 31st, the same day as Halloween and Samhain. So we have kids from continental France and the British Isles, both carving vegetables on the same day. They both carve faces in them, they both put candles in them, and all of that on the same day that Samhain used to be celebrated. It's impossible that it's just a coincidence. It's clearly a leftover from their Celtic heritage. So I covered why it starts at night. I covered the association with monsters and the undead. I covered why people dress up as monsters. And I've covered the origin of the jack-o'-lantern. Not the origin of the legend, but the tradition of carving vegetables. Which only leaves us with the tradition of trick-or-treating. At this point it gets a lot more complicated. And I don't want to spend an hour on it because, like I said earlier, I didn't write a script for it. I barely did any research. And from what little research I did, I found out that there's a lot of stuff to cover. So around the 8th or 9th century, the Catholic Church decided to move All Saints' Day from the middle of May to November 1st to try and counter the pagan influence of Samhain. And it would start on October 31st at night. One of the traditions of All Saints' Day was that the kids were expected to go door to door to ask either for charity or something called soul cakes. Soul cakes were apparently a cross between a biscuit and a scone, usually with a cross on them, either carved into the dough, or they would place sweet things on it like raisins to form a cross. They would usually put spices in it like cinnamon, curran, and other spices that were usually used to make desserts, so it was supposed to be a sweet cake. And they would give those sweets to either children or poor people. And in exchange, the people receiving the cakes were supposed to pray for the souls of the people the family had lost during the year. It could have been a brother, a sister, an aunt, or a grandma, a parent, a child, even a pet. And if I remember correctly, the prayers were either supposed to help or appease the souls of the dead the families had recently lost. Now, I don't know for you guys, but to me, it screams paganism. And according to what little information I've gathered, soul cakes seem to have been extremely popular in Portugal and the British Isles. And Halloween in the British Isles apparently had some pretty similar traditions. Just like with All Saints' Day, the children were expected to go door to door to collect some food, collect some money for charity, or, in some specific areas, the kids were supposed to go door to door to collect wood, because they were supposed to build a ritual fire. In some areas of the British Isles, villagers would build a big white horse mascot. They would take a horse skull, and then they would put the horse skull at the end of a pole, wrap the pole in white sheets, and it would create some sort of a white horse, a dead horse. And then the dead horse would be paraded around, and kids would follow it across the countryside. And they would stop at every house, every farm to go and collect the things they were supposed to collect, so charity money, food, and the wood to make the ritual fire. And to me, that screams old pagan rituals that we've lost the meaning of. Or if we do know the meaning behind the ritual, then I just didn't have time to look it up, because again, I'm pretty last minute on that one. The first time I ever heard about the story of the soul cakes was in university. Now, the story I'm about to tell you guys, I don't know how accurate it is, because the woman who told it to us was some neo-pagan feminist, and there's a couple of things that she said that I know for a fact were wrong. So, take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt. So according to that woman, the kids were going door to door to ask for offerings that were destined to the dead. They were apparently holding some sort of official religious position or an official religious office, and they had the authority to ask for the offerings that were destined to the dead, and they even had the authority to eat the offerings in their name. That's the story the woman told us. I don't know how accurate it is. I've never looked it up. I'm gonna have to look it up one day. But I'm just giving it to you guys because I think it's an interesting story. And honestly, full disclosure, I really like that story. I want it to be true. I like the idea of the kids having an official religious office for one day and going around collecting food. I think it's really cute. But to recapitulate my point, kids in the British Isles would go door to door to collect food, money, or different materials for their celebration of what we call today Halloween. We also know that at the same time, the Catholic Church would ask kids to do basically the same thing during All Saints' Day. Which, I don't know if I've already mentioned it, All Saints' Day used to be in the spring. They moved it to the fall to counteract a pagan celebration, which was most likely Samhain. And in that knockoff of Samhain, they were asking kids to do the exact same things. They were asking kids to go door to door, collect sweet food, collect charity, and do things that had to do with the dead and spirits, which are the same things that people do on Halloween. So even if we don't have explicit first-hand account telling us that people used to go door to door during Samhain to collect food, money, or materials, there's just so many coincidences, similarities, and circumstantial evidence that we can almost say with certainty that during Samhain, kids did go trick-or-treating. So to recap everything we've talked about so far, we know that both Halloween and Samhain were celebrated on the night of October 31st. We know that both holidays had to do with monsters and ghosts and the undead. We know that for both holidays, people had to dress up like monsters and the undead. And we know that for both holidays, people would carve vegetables into scary lanterns. And the fact that both the Christian holiday and the pagan celebrations would ask kids to go door to door to collect different things. With all the evidences, coincidences, and anecdotes that I've presented to you in this video, I think it goes without a doubt that Halloween is in fact a modernized version of the Celtic celebration of Samhain. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope it gave you some good ideas for Halloween. Hopefully the video won't come out too late and you'll still be able to use the ideas. Personally, if I had a horse skull, I would only ever dress up as that white horse thing that the Irish and the Welsh people do, because it looks really cool. And yes, I'm still working on my video on the Grackeye brothers. All I have to do now is edit the sound and then make the video. Hopefully it won't take too long.